Hi, I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome to the Plymouth Select Board candidate interview. I want to take a moment to thank our candidate for participating in this interview and collaborating with PACTV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview-style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting at the most 45 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked during this format. We aim to ask up to 5 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses, along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or that they would like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. Let's get started. Today we're speaking with Everett Malaguti, one of the 6 candidates for 2 seats on the Plymouth Select Board in the Plymouth Town election. Everett, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Julie, for having me tonight.
Absolutely. We're going to dig right into the questions, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Question number 1 is about capital expenses and budgeting. Every year, budgets are prepared, debated, recalculated, and finally presented to town meeting for approval. Salaries and benefits, town-owned buildings, ongoing capital expenditures are often debated, and there are always projects or initiatives that do not get funded each year. The Select Board is required to review the annual and capital budgets. What parameters do you use in determining which budgetary items you will support and which you will not?
So that's a very interesting question because as some people know, I sit on town meeting, and I've sat on town meeting for roughly a decade. And at first I looked at doing it as looking at financially based only, just to see how the entire thing would actually fit, how people felt about actually expending money, and how the taxpayers actually felt they were constrained by the rising taxes and everything else. But then I look at it and go into depth in the article. I don't look at it just as financial anymore. I look and see, is it going to have a benefit to the residents, whether it's rebuilding an old bridge that you need for at least a few subdivisions to get to, and that's going to affect their livelihood and their work. And if they can or cannot get to work, that may affect their ability to pay taxes. So then that's going to burden them even more. Looking at something that's going to affect our tourism, if it's something on the waterfront, we need to make sure that we enhance that. But we also have to make sure that while we are benefiting our industries, it's not putting an undue burden on the taxpayers as well too, which also in some aspects are tourists as well too, but we want to make sure that the residents are taken care of first, and then everyone else is taken care of after that, because if we don't support our residents, then there's nothing for visitors to come to and actually help support the taxes that the residents can then be offset. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I always take a approach to it fiscally, but then as stated before, I always take approach to it fiscally, but then I always break it down because I don't want to just look at it as numbers, even though I am a numbers person when I'm at town meeting or at any of the other meetings. I want to make sure that it's going to have a holistic approach to it, that we look at all the benefits and cons to an issue, and then if it deems that the benefits outweigh the cons, then I never look at anything personally and saying whether or not I like an issue. I'm not going to just say, no, I'm not going to vote for it because I don't approve of it. I'm going to make sure that everyone's voice is heard on, say, if the residents don't want it, then I'm going to vote it down. If the residents do want it, then I'll vote for it. Sometimes you get into issues where the residents don't want it, but it's an actual thing that's going to be a much beneficial aspect to it. And I can state to us on a few instances. We've had, especially as everyone knows, the town buildings are not in the best repair and all that, and we've had a few major expenses for them, especially with the fire stations and all that. And I cringed at the numbers as well too for those, and I really don't want to pay for it. But if we don't, we're not just affecting the actual ability for the firefighters or any other agency to respond to any situation that will affect the residents' livelihoods, but it's also going to affect the health of the town workers that are in those buildings, and it's also going to cost us more in the future if we just do small patch jobs or not do holistic building approach to that.
Okay. Now, the way it stands now, if I understand this correctly, is the town manager sends the budget to the select board, and the select board will go through it, and then they'll send it on to finance, right?
Yeah, so advisory and finance will look at it. The select board looks at it. It's within that same direction of down the ladder. But and if both of them do come up with different numbers, then obviously the finance committee will then send it back to the select board and say, these are our numbers that we feel comfortable with. And then the select board determines if they want to stick with their numbers or stick with these finance committee's numbers, or they may have a middle ground to it as well too. They may say, well, we're sticking to these except for these two, which we feel that are more appropriate. So then the budget's always going to be in flux, and it's always in flux up to town meeting as well too, because town meeting is the final say for whether funds get approved or not. The select board and the finance committee are just the recommendations to them, and that's always a hard thing too. You want to really be the person that says this needs to be approved, and if town meeting votes it down, then unfortunately you can't really change that, because that's how town meeting votes, and that's how it should be, having all the different powers have a balance and a give and take to it. So I feel it's a hard thing for the select board to do, because the select board really wants to do a lot of things that town meeting may or may not want to do, and vice versa. But it's up to the select board to actually have the position that this is what they put as a goal or put as their actual main idea, and then it's then vetted throughout all the other committees, and then
So if you get elected to the select board, you will be one of the first that can go through this whole budget and ask the kinds of questions you ask and do the deep dive that you do. Do you think that you will be able to make a difference in how efficient that process is?
I think the process is somewhat efficient the way it stands. I do think from my point of view that I could probably make it a little bit better, because I know there are some things that may not really be looked at per se. I myself use a fine-tooth comb when I go through everything, whether I have the town meeting book in hand or whether I have just the regular articles that are being presented that night during one of the meetings. And I either during the meeting or externally during regular business days, I'll ask certain things, and I'll go through old article language, see if there's anything that could be cleaned up, maybe save a few dollars here and there that has been lying around, and that I have done in the past. I think what was one of the sticking points was we have a thing called Burke's Law, which is basically a rendering of all the articles that have been passed during town meeting and what's remaining of those articles for funding. And in the past, there wasn't really that much look into it, and I started to, and I know other people have as well too. I'm not the first one to look at it, but there's been a lot of people that have been looking and saying, well, why are we spending money on this project when we still have money from that same project, something similar to that project? Why are we not fully allocating that money to it before we're spending new money and then going through it? And I do want to credit our finance director, Lynn Barrett. She's actually been a lot more engaged into that, and she's been going through that and asking departments to actually close out everything that has been in there before asking for new money, so we can actually have it rotating and not have stagnant funds that are wasting taxpayer dollars.
Makes total sense. Okay, great. Question 2 is about infrastructure. The town of Plymouth is massive in area. Infrastructure integrity is a complicated subject, which includes the sourcing and delivery of water, the collection and transport of sewage, the upkeep of roads and bridges, just to name a few. What do you think are Plymouth's greatest challenges with its current infrastructure?
That's actually a good one. I think that there's a number of them. So obviously our roadway network is one of the challenging ones. We have one of the largest roadway systems in the state, over 400 miles of roads, whether they're paved or unpaved, or I should say accepted or unaccepted roads. And that affects a lot of things, especially with police and fire, to make sure that people get the service that they need at an accurate and a timely manner, and make sure that it's within federal standards for response times. Also, the siting of our public facilities to make sure that they're not clustering all of them within one area of town, so that there's more approachability for people that live in the southern end of Plymouth or the western or the southwestern end of Plymouth that have a lot sparser public infrastructure down there that they could actually assist from. Because I know that one of the issues in the past has been, well, should we do a town hall annex or something like that that's on the southern end of town so that people don't have to constantly drive 20, 30 minutes from one end of town to get to town hall. And I believe we sort of helped fix that with some of the online permitting and some of the extra online services, and also what was now just released, I think it was roughly a week ago or less, the new website, which is much more user and approacher friendly, and also has a 311 system for us, which helps different departments help the residents that are on either on the road and they see a pothole or see something broken or anything like that. They can respond right to that either on their smartphone app or onto the website,
So
and
that's
then it'll
an
be
infrastructure reporting system, the
it's
311?
it's an incident reporting
Okay,
system, so
yep.
you can say like if there's a street let out, a pothole,
yep.
if a stop sign fell down or something like that. And
Great.
these are small things, obviously, but these are things that people encounter every day on
Sure.
their way to work or play or anything like that. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure is actually available in an adequate position so that we can respond to anything. People have less expenses on wear and tear to their vehicles, increased assessed values to their houses, so they actually have worth within the home that they bought, and also to just have pride in the community. If we have dilapidated or failing infrastructure, that's not showing that we really care about the incredible community that we have.
Okay. So our roadways is you think our number one?
I think our roadways are number one because we could have great everything else, but if we don't have a way to actually get there, then it makes it impossible to actually have any other infrastructure.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, question 3 is about the charter. After many months of meetings, input, and analysis, a duly elected group of Charter Commission members finalized their suggested changes to the town of Plymouth's existing charter. Whether or not to adopt this new charter will be on the ballot on May 20th. Will you be voting yes or no on the adoption of this charter, and why?
So I'll be voting no on the charter, and I just want to state that I do appreciate everyone that actually worked on the charter, because a very, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but it's a very important, but it's also a very long duration task. It's many hours of work, and I have gone through that from other committees doing hundreds of hours of work on certain topics. So I appreciate them for doing all the hard work on that, but the way that the actual language is written in that, I myself cannot support it, because I'd be doing a disservice to the residents. I'd be doing a disservice to town meeting and the actual employees that are in town by increasing the workload on them, by having all these other local mandates placed upon them by the charter to do, which is going to make government run a lot less efficiently than it is now. We always keep hearing from residents, why isn't government running more efficiently for us? Why can't we get better response times from town hall or from the DPW or any of that? And I believe from the language in here, it's going to actually muddy the waters a lot more, and it's going to make it more inefficient to get responses that are proper. Another thing is the different ways that we are wanting to change how power works. We have COPC and town meeting and the select board, which are basically the 3 branches along with advisory and finance that mingles through all 3 of those for us to have a checks and balance power. This is actually not going to have as much check and balance, because you're going to have people that are going to be on town meeting that are also going to be looking at the budget on FinCom. You're going to have town meeting voting for the actual town moderator. I'm not opposed to having the town moderator voted on by town meeting, but I think there should be a little bit of discretion from making sure that you don't have one branch of government being also able to infiltrate the other side by either having a seat on town meeting and a seat in the finance committee at the same time. I think that while it may be advantageous, I don't think it's the best to muddy those waters. Also, the charter is looking at the additional staffing that's needed, the additional expenses for either FOIA requests or anything else that are looking for that. I believe it was stated during a couple charter meetings and presentation forums that it's going to cost upwards of $1 million a year for us to just attain what is in the new proposed charter. And and we just went through a very tough budget cycle ourselves, trying to make sure we could make ends meet in every area, and we had many attritions from the school and town side for people. And we keep hearing from residents, why are we continually raising taxes? Why are we going to burden the residents having this tax onto them that never really needed to be in the first place? I agree that, and I am a town meeting person. If the voters want to go to a mayor council or a town manager council or anything, I'm fine with that. That's up to the voters to decide, not for me to decide for them or for me to state why they should do that. But I think whatever government we have needs to work for the people and have the efficiency for the people and the accountability. If we don't have those basic standards to it, no matter what form we take or have, whether or not we have the charter passed, we're still going to have a town meeting form until another commission gets stated. So if government doesn't work for the people, then why have government? Because then it's not going to be what they want.
Are there any parts of this new proposed charter that you think are improvements to what we currently have?
I've gone through a number of times. I don't think there's really major improvements. I think there's like little micro improvements here and there for some efficiencies, but it's going to encumber a lot more time. The only one thing that it actually brought to light, which I know that has been talked about in the past during committee of precinct chairs, was that the committee of precinct chairs would have some extra power looking at town meeting articles and all that stuff throughout the budget. But I don't think what was actually recognized was during the actual creation of this charter is that the committee of precinct chairs in our current charter already has that power to do that. They just haven't really been up to it per se. I know a few members have tried to do it in the past to actually get different standing committees to do review of old town meeting articles and review of other items that actually happen. And the committee still has power to do that. It's not going to change whether or not the charter passes or not. And I think that that should be a hard look for the committee of precinct chairs. If they really want the power that they're looking at within this charter, they should really start making an example of it by using the same language roughly that's within the current charter first. Because if they don't do that, then they may be overburdening members of it that don't necessarily want to or don't even have the time to actually do that. And I know it takes a lot of time to do all that legwork, because some of the legwork looking at this current charter is similar legwork to what the advisory and finance does. And I don't know if COPC wants to do that. I know they want the power to do that, but they already have the power to do that. So I think that that needs to be a clarification point.
Did you go to any of these charter commission meetings?
I personally went to a few of them. The rest of them I reviewed online through PACTV after they happened due to time constraints. But I did look at a lot of the meetings that did go on for them.
And you agree that they went through a very long vetting process and they brought in all kinds of different people to give their input, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you are a no on this charter. All right, we're going to go to question number 4. Economic development and tourism. Tourism and economic development are crucial aspects of Plymouth's current and future financial health. What priorities do you place on these areas, and what are the drawbacks that concern you? And I know they're two separate, economic development and tourism are two separate entities, but a lot of times they play together.
So we do need more economic development in this town, and whether it's more economic development for land area that we need to look for, or whether it's better zoning of the actual economic areas that we actually have now, either if it's more conjoined structures to utilize land efficiently within our industrial parks, or using different height codes to make sure that we actually use some of the vertical space. And I know that's a contentious point. You don't want to have a lot of people don't want to have a 100-foot building appear and then you can see it from everywhere. And I'm sort of on that line too, but we need to look at a middle ground to see what can actually be attained. That's a better use of what we have to bring in more high-skilled, high-paying jobs, which is one of the factors that economic development is sort of stymied in a way, not just the land area, but we have to make sure we have the workforce to actually bring in economic development here. Because if we don't have the workforce to have in like the high-tech healthcare fields and all that, then they're not really going to look at Plymouth, even if we have the best of everything else.
You mean the industries won't look at Plymouth if we don't have the workforce to support that industry? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And how do we circle that square? How do we fix that?
So I think that, and unfortunately I'm not running for that part, but I think that's a good part for the schools to be looking at as well too, that there needs to be not just more voc tech training, but I think there needs to be more industry geared training, so that if someone has a knack for mathematics, that we gear it towards certain industries to make it upright. We need to have more work programs that we could do, either internships or like we have with the allied health, that they work in some of the nursing facilities and all that. We need to have some more interactiveness so that they can get a better threshold and they'll learn things that aren't as easily taught within books in school, that they'll get a hands-on experience. And I think that's one of the things that schooling is turning to these days. We need to get more of a hands-on approach to actually looking at it, because not everyone is a book learner. I was a book learner, but there were some things that I did visually better than going in a book. And I think we need to look at the personal attributes of the person to make sure that we get a better rounded person and more career-oriented fields for our students. On the tourism side, we obviously want to make sure we have as much tourism as possible. That's basically our main industry for Plymouth, but we also want to make sure that while we're enhancing our tourism industry, we also make sure that we're not burdening the residents, because the residents are tourists too. We live here year-round. The tourists, even though we want them to stay a lot longer, they're not here for a long time, but we want to make sure we bring as much activity for them, but also make sure that the residents can engage in that same tourism activity, but also we want to make sure that we're not affecting parking, access to restaurants, public parks, and everything like that too. We want to make sure we have a balanced approach to it so that we're not overburdening one sector of town for another, but we also want to make sure that we're not also overburdening our infrastructure to try and attain higher amounts of tourism or economic development. And that goes back to the earlier question, is if we have better infrastructure and more right-sided infrastructure, we'll be able to attain better economic development for the town. And if we use that correctly, then that will help lower tax rates or stabilize tax rates more, because it'll push more of the burden off of just the residential side, and it'll allow commercial to actually pay for some of the residential operating budgets.
Right. Now there's a convention center being proposed, looked at, studied, to bring a convention center to Plymouth that would obviously bring some form of economic development. It would bring a lot of people here. How do you feel about that?
I'm actually interested in it. I still wear the devil's advocate a little bit. I try and look and see, well, what is it going to do for traffic? What is it going to do for parking? What is it going to do for some of the infrastructure that's already somewhat congested within either the downtown or central Plymouth, wherever they decide to put the convention center, because that's not a finalized site yet. But just to make sure that wherever it's placed, we look at everything that could go wrong first, and then what could go right, because if we look at what can go wrong, we can find all the mistakes that could happen. What could be a detriment? Could it be that we may need to build a parking garage? Would it be better infrastructure for water and sewer that's needed for that to increase the level of activity that the tourism, that the convention center places? Because it could be concerts that are in there, it could be expos, anything in there, and that could bring 2,000 people, it could be 10,000 people. We never know, depending on what's actually being proposed for actual events of that place. But I think it's something that's been looked at for a long time for this area, and I think that it's needed. Obviously, it's not going to be anything that outpaces the Boston Expo Center or anything like that, because obviously, one, we don't have really the space for that or some of the infrastructure for that. But we want to make sure that we broaden our tourism aspect, because if we bring people in, because we could bring outside trades, we could bring like a electronics expo or something like that, so even though that may not happen, but something like that, and that would bring people that are outside of the region that would come in, visit Plymouth and get to know everything about it, and then say, oh, family, we can actually come here for our next vacation, or bring to their friends, and then that would help drive the tourism out of the regional frame and bring it more national for us. We could actually market our brand a lot better for us. And I know See Plymouth does a lot for the town, but having this will help See Plymouth in actually broadening to those industries that aren't necessarily within that purview.
Right. Now, what about the small cruise line that might be coming into our harbor? How do you feel about that?
I think that's good, and that's actually one thing of tourism that could be helpful to us is looking at the water, because it helps us reduce congestion for the roads. And I know that parking and cars is a lot that we have to deal with. If we can bring in either day trippers on a cruise line that are only providing foot traffic and not providing vehicle traffic and congestion like that, that's actually a good thing for us. It brings in a lot of revenue, not just for the waterfront businesses, but if we can bring people up from the waterfront, the downtown businesses will prosper from that. We get a lot of other excursions that could happen. We could get people that may want to actually go out to the beach for a day. They'll go either to some of the historic landmarks. They may go to Village Landing, do some shopping, some of the ice cream places or the great restaurants that we do have on the downtown. But also, maybe they want to go out the beaten path and go to a restaurant in North Plymouth, go to the one in Cedarville, something like that. Maybe they'll actually, if the cruise line stays a couple of days, maybe they'll be able to go to one end of town one day and then go to another thing the next day, and it'll elongate stays for us. But I think economic development and tourism, and combined, what we need to look at as well too is providing different modes of access to us. And I know that the vehicle has dominated a lot, and it's still going to dominate for numbers of years, but we need to look at different modes of transportation for us. I know that I myself on the Visitor Services Board, we helped fund the Ride Circuit program that See Plymouth brought about, which is actually a low cost and free ride service of electric buses that bring people throughout the downtown, other historic sites or other areas that provides better access for the community, but also tourists, so they don't have to wait for, and I know the Gatra line does a lot, but the Gatra line isn't always as reliable, and it takes a long time for the Gatra to do its loop around. And this provides one-shot instant access, which tourists need so that they can enjoy their stay better and enjoy more activities.
So do you think we need more of that?
I think we need more of that. We need to have more accessibility. I know that in the past on the Revenue Idea Task Force that I was on, we actually formulated one of our ideas is actually creating a ferry system that we would actually have from Boston to here, and that could either be, if people want to use it for commuting, that's fine, but we looked at it more on the tourism side for it, that people could actually just relax on the way down here. They don't have to get stressed on a train or a bus or driving down here to enjoy. They could actually just enjoy the hour or whatever it takes ride down here. They can do coastal sightseeing while they're doing it, and then arrive in Plymouth. They'll be at their hotel, and then they'll just book a trip back, and then we could have that. As long as we get, and I think those are some of the creative ideas that we need for not just tourism and economic development, but to actually help bring either more services to the town, but bring them efficiently so that we can actually provide everything that we want, but not burden the taxpayers in stating, okay, we want to provide these extra 10 services to you, but do you want to pay the extra $15 million a year that's going to take?
Right.
If we can look at efficiencies within departments, or if we can look at efficiencies within operations and even bring in new revenue through new different forms, like if we did the ferry, that would bring in some new revenue sources as well too. Those are ways that we need to actually do that to help the residents, but also provide better services for them.
Okay, thank you. This is the last question I have for you. It's about the broad field of candidates that's running. There are 6 individuals running for 2 3-year terms on the select board. Each brings a different set of experiences and history. Given that one of the select board's general powers and duties is to adopt policy directives and guidelines, how do you balance your own viewpoints and biases to serve the greater good for the entire town?
So as I stated before, when I look at the budgets, I look at everything, and I still do, no matter what. Everyone always looks at everything personally first, and then they have to then state, well, I know this is what I feel, but if you're, especially in the seat of a select board or even town meeting itself, you don't want to just be you. You need to be the people that elected you, that you represent. You need to actually make sure that you listen to all of them and not just a small inner circle, even just of yourself. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do because you want to actually make sure that you're actually doing the best possible, but you still have doubts, and that's where your little devil advocate can play, of saying that you really don't want to do it, even though it's the best for the community. But if you're not doing something that's going to benefit the community, I think that's a disservice even to yourself as well, not just a disservice to the residents that elected you, but to yourself, because you're putting doubt within yourself if it's your actual leadership or anything like that. I think that when we, and whoever gets in, hopefully myself, but whoever gets in, that they look at it as a whole perspective, and then you start dissecting it, that you want to make sure that you find everything that will fit for most everyone. Not everyone's going to be a winner in it, and it's a hard thing to do, try and making everything a winner, because if you do, then sometimes you actually make it more of a mess than you started out with. But
so you basically are saying that you're going to take all of the sides into account, and even if it's not what you would have picked, if it's what majority rules and what makes sense to most people, you would vote for it, or you would push it, or you would help it.
Yes, I sit on the committee, so I see this all the time of seeing the give and take, and one side saying, well, we want this, but then I'm like, I know you want that, and I want that as well too, but the other side needs to be accounted as well too. You can't just do one or the other. You need to take pieces that work from each side and then provide a consensus to them. And that's what I've tried to do. It hasn't always worked in my favor, but that's what the job entails. If you can't try and do a consensus of that, then there's not really a point at trying to govern. Because
it can't be my way or the highway.
Exactly,
that just doesn't work. Yep, agreed. Okay, so you can take 5-6 minutes to talk about anything we didn't talk about that you think is important for the people to know how you feel. Revisit anything we did talk about if you wanted to add something, and then tell the voters out there, right to that camera, why they should vote for you. Go.
So, some of the things I'd like to talk about, going back to actually a couple of our questions of how government operates, our economic development, and also our infrastructure, that I think now more than ever that we need to look at fresh ideas, creativity, and innovation within how town operates. I know that we made small steps to this when we enacted a new website to be user-friendly, and some of the goals of the select board to provide better transparency for the citizens, to make sure that people actually have the information they need. But it also works on the financial and municipal and to actually look at efficiencies to see what could actually be done easier for departments like we did for e-permitting, and we need to expand on that, which makes the workload a lot easier and streamlined, not always for the development side, but also for town staff, because you have to go through multiple departments for some permits, and it makes it a lot easier access, so you're not chasing after one department or another to get a project approved, which could be delayed, and then it takes a lot of months or weeks to even get that done. That prevents development sometimes from happening here that could be beneficial to us, because it takes a long lag time from one committee to another before you get a final vote on it. But the creativity and out-of-the-box ideas is something that I looked at for the Revenue Idea Task Force when I was on that for a few years, and we had a multiple of ideas for how to actually raise revenue that was either from outside of other industries that wouldn't affect the residents, or look at ways of saving money that is in the same way of creating revenue, because if you're saving money, that's extra money that you have to put into another initiative that's not increasing taxes on it. We did a couple of those by our former chair on the Energy Committee, and now myself as chair on the Energy Committee. We passed Green Communities designation, which helps us provide grant funding for municipal projects and also for green initiatives for us, which enhances not just the quality and the climate for us, but it enhances our pocketbooks as well too, because it saves us more money for the wear and tear and replacement, but it also saves us money on the electricity and other things. And we're looking at other avenues like that. And we should be looking at other avenues like that, not just on the energy side, but through all departments that we need to look at, even if they're small figures, if they're maybe $10,000 here and there, those all add up to a lot bigger pot for us that help the residents afford to live here, help provide a better quality of life for us here, but also make the most efficient use of our tax dollars, which is what residents keep asking us every single day, is are my taxes being used as efficiently as possible? So with those, I would just like to say I can bring those ideas to the table. I've worked on those ideas, and I continue to work on those ideas, and I'm always up to the table to have the citizens come to me or me come out to the citizens with any ideas that they want. Without the citizens' collaboration, I don't like working in a vacuum. I need to make sure that everyone is accounted and every idea is heard. Whether it's a good idea or not, that's up to the board to decide, not just myself. I'm not a single person for this. I may be a single person going for a seat at the table, but I'm always the person that will be available to everyone. And Plymouth needs people that can be out of the box, creative, that actually have the tenacity to do this, that aren't afraid of a challenge, and whether it's an agreed upon one or not, that they're not afraid to actually rustle some feathers every once in a while, because those are the times that you actually get the best ideas. So if you want a person like that at the table that has your best interest at heart, that can bring in new solutions, that actually listens to the taxpayers about their needs and wants, and will be able to help stabilize the actual budget for us and bring the budget into more accountability for the residents, then I am your person. I would ask for your vote on May 20th. Please vote for Everett Malaguti for Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Everett. Thank you so much for participating in this interview. We wish you the best of luck throughout the campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, PACTV.org, for replay times and online viewing options, including PACTV's on-demand and streaming service, PACTV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the election on Saturday, May 20th. Thank you and good day.